The night air tastes like salt and burned fuel, warm on your tongue, even before the first warning tone goes off. Somewhere out in the black water, a tiny speck is moving fast, too low for a clean radar picture, too cheap to feel like a threat, too many to ignore. On the bridge, the screens glow ghost blue across tired faces, and you can hear it in the room. Not fear yet, just a tightening rhythm, like a drummer speeding up half a beat at a time. A voice cuts through the hum. Contacts multiplied. The system is classifying, then reclassifying, then hesitating. Because the first thing to break in modern war is not steel, it is certainty. The ship has missiles, radars, guns, and a reputation that costs billions. But right now, the captain's most precious resource is time. And time is draining like water through a cracked hull. A new alert, then another, then the same alert repeated with different numbers. The kind of repetition that makes your stomach drop because it means the machine is not sure. Outside, the sea looks calm, almost lazy. But the calm is a trick, because the real battlefield is invisible. It is the network, the sensors, the data links, the decision chain that turns dots into targets. If that chain snaps, a $2 billion warship can become a blind giant swinging in the dark. And tonight, the attackers are not trying to sink the ship first, they are trying to make it see the wrong world. Picture the ship as a living creature. Skin made of steel, eyes made of radar, ears made of passive sensors, nerves made of cables and radio waves. Now, picture an enemy that does not aim for the heart, it aims for the eyes, because a creature that cannot see will run itself into a wall. This is the kill chain war. Not a duel of weapons, but a race of cycles, who can find, decide, and fire faster, and who can force the other side to waste shots on ghosts. On paper, the ship's layered defense looks perfect. Long-range missiles for far threats, medium-range interceptors for leakers, close-in guns for panic range. But paper does not include human breath, sweaty hands, or the sound of a warning tone that keeps coming back like a heartbeat you cannot slow down. Here is the ugly math. Every defensive layer is a magazine, and magazines run out. If you have 60 interceptors, you do not have 60 chances, because you might need 2 per target, or 3, or you might fire at decoys because the screen is lying. And the moment the system cannot tell decoy from drone, every button press becomes a gamble, and every gamble costs you something you cannot replace at sea. So the attackers send the cheapest things first, not because they expect to hit, but because they want you to spend. They want your kill chain to choke on its own speed. In your headphones, the operator's voice is calm, but you can hear the strain. Dozens of contacts, altitude uncertain, headings converging. A naval battle used to be about who had bigger guns. Then it became about who had longer missiles, and now it is about who has the cleaner picture of reality. Is less than #0. 2 hash is greater than. Reality is not a single thing. It is built, layer by layer, by sensors that can be fooled, jammed, blinded by weather, or overwhelmed by too many dots at once. The ship's radar sweeps, the electronic support measures listen, the combat system fuses it into one story, and that story is what the captain fights. If you can rewrite the story, you can control the fight without ever touching the hull. Out there, the first wave is not even trying to be stealthy. It is trying to be loud, to flood the receiver, to make the system work so hard it starts dropping details. Think of it like a crowded room. If 20 people talk, you can still track a conversation. If 200 people shout, your brain picks the wrong voice and fills in the rest. Now imagine the room is your radar screen, and every wrong guess costs a missile, a minute, a piece of confidence. The worst part is the silence between decisions, the half-second where everyone waits for the machine to commit, and the machine waits for a human to confirm. That tiny delay is where modern war slips a knife in. Let's slow the moment down, not to relax, but to see the trap. When a contact appears, the system wants 3 things: identity, trajectory, and intent. But in a swarm, identity becomes a fog, because many drones look identical, and intent becomes a guess, because their paths can change in an instant. So you fall back to trajectory, and that is where the enemy plays chess with your ammunition. Some drones fly straight, some zigzag, some climb, then dive. Some slow down like they are lost, and every weird move forces the defense to recalculate. That recalculation is not free. It costs processing. It costs operator attention. It costs seconds. And seconds are the currency of survival. Now add electronic warfare. A pulse of noise, a sudden gap, a false echo that makes a dot appear where nothing exists. The human brain hates uncertainty. It tries to complete the picture, and that instinct is exactly what the attackers exploit. Because if they can make you believe there are 30 threats when there are 10, you will respond as if it is 30. And if you respond as if it is 30, you might empty your magazine before the real punch arrives. In the next minute, the battle is less about explosions and more about choices. Do you light up the biggest radar to get the cleanest picture, knowing that doing so is like shouting your location into the dark? Do you stay quiet and rely on passive sensors, knowing the picture will be fuzzier? And fuzziness is how mistakes are born. Do you fire early, far out, with expensive missiles? Or do you hold, hoping to save shots, risking that the last layer becomes the only layer? The room smells like coffee and hot electronics, and the air feels thinner, like the ship is breathing faster. A new report comes in. Another sensor sees something different. Two pictures that do not perfectly match. And now the fusion system has to pick which truth to trust. That is the hidden battlefield. Trust inside the ship. Trust between sensors. Trust between humans and machines. If the enemy can inject doubt, even for a few seconds, they can force hesitation, and hesitation is lethal. The captain hears a number, interceptors remaining, and the number is smaller than it should be at this point in the night. And suddenly the question is not, can we shoot them down? It is, can we afford to keep shooting at the wrong things? Here is the hard part to admit. Even the best systems do not create certainty. They create probability. What we know is that modern ships rely on layered defenses, sensor fusion, and networks to turn detection into action, and that electronic warfare and saturation can degrade those processes fast. What we do not know, in any specific real event, is exactly how clean the sensor picture was, how much was jammed, what rules the operators were under, and what information was missing at the worst possible second. So when you hear confident claims like, "This system is unbeatable," treat it like someone selling you a miracle product at a market stall. Because the ocean does not care about brochures, it cares about physics, heat, signal strength, and human limits. Back on the bridge, the operator's voice dips for a moment, then steadies, because steady voices keep panic from spreading. But panic spreads anyway, quietly, as a kind of mental fog, when the screen refuses to become simple. The enemy wants that fog. They want the crew to fight shadows, to burn the night away one interceptor at a time. And then, when the magazines are light and the confidence is thinner, the real weapon shows up. Not bigger, not faster, just timed perfectly for your weakest moment. The kill chain is a conveyor belt. Sense, process, decide, act, then update. Every step has a bottleneck, and bottlenecks are where swarms and jammers strike. If the sensors are flooded, the processing step slows. If the processing is messy, the decision step hesitates. If decisions hesitate, the action step fires late or wastes shots. Now add a human, because humans are part of the chain, and humans have emotions, fatigue, and a deep fear of being wrong on record. Rules of engagement matter. Confirmations matter. Permissions matter. And the enemy knows that bureaucracy has a heartbeat too. You can almost feel the tempo shift when the ship has to ask, can we engage? Are we sure? What is the risk? And the drones keep moving while questions are still midair. Some drones are decoys. Some are scouts. Some carry jammers. Some carry nothing but a cheap engine and a loud signature. But the ship has to treat them all as if any one of them might be the one that hits. That is the attacker's advantage. Uncertainty is their weapon, and your reaction is the ammunition they want to drain. Because a drained ship is not dead, it is worse. It is alive, but exhausted, and exhaustion makes mistakes inevitable. Listen to the sounds, the soft clack of keys, the short-clipped radio calls, the rising pitch of alarms that never fully stop. A defensive system is designed for clarity, track, classify, engage, kill. But swarms are designed for confusion, merge tracks, split tracks, appear, disappear. One moment a contact is 1, the next it is 3, the next it is none. Then it is back again. And each change forces the system to rebuild its confidence from scratch. This is where the enemy can win without landing a hit. They can force the defense to chase its own tail. And they do not need a perfect jammer to do it. They just need good timing and enough cheap bodies in the air to fill your screen. The captain stares at a map that is not a map. It is a story made of probability clouds and predicted paths. You can smell the ocean through a slightly open hatch, and it feels wrong that the sea can smell so normal while the ship's brain is on fire. Someone says, "We are down to a limited number of interceptors in this sector," and suddenly the defense is not a wall, it is a countdown. The crew knows what comes next. The last layer is not meant to carry the whole night. And the enemy knows it too. Which is why the next wave is already on the way, hidden behind the noise. Here is the shift that defines modern naval war. The fight is no longer ship versus missile, it is network versus network. A ship alone is powerful. A ship connected to aircraft, satellites, other ships, and unmanned scouts becomes something else, a moving fortress with extended senses. But networks have a weakness. They depend on links, frequencies, encryption, line of sight, and the simple fact that signals travel through air that can be filled with noise. If you cut the links, you do not need to beat the fortress, you just need to isolate it. Isolation is the quiet killer, because it turns teamwork into solo mode. And solo mode is where swarms shine. The enemy can force the ship to rely on its own sensors only. And once that happens, your picture shrinks, your reaction time shortens, and your options narrow. This is why the attackers might not aim to destroy the ship first. They might aim to make it blind, deaf, and lonely. Because a blind ship still floats, and a floating ship that cannot see still has to choose, fire or hold, reveal or hide, spend or save. A decision comes in, engage at medium range, but the medium range layer was never meant to handle this many at once. And the moment you hear the guns spool up, you realize the night has entered the distance where mistakes become irreversible. The close-in defense is loud, violent, and brutally honest. It does not care about theories. It cares about what is in front of it right now. You can feel the vibration through the deck, a low mechanical growl that turns into a roar, and the air seems to shake as the ship throws metal into the dark. Tracers streak out like angry fireflies, and for a moment, the battle finally becomes visible. But visibility can be comforting and misleading at the same time. Because the most dangerous threats in a kill chain war are often the ones you do not see, the jammer that is not emitting, the drone that is quiet, the missile hidden behind the chaos. Someone calls out a track that is behaving too cleanly, too straight, too confident, like it is not part of the swarm, and that detail lands in the room like ice water. The cheap drones were the curtain, and now something heavier may be walking onto the stage. The crew has already spent attention, spent processing, spent missiles, and now the ship's defense has fewer choices, not because the ship is weak, but because the enemy forced it to play the wrong game first. This is the heart of Season 1's finale. You do not lose to one weapon. You lose to a sequence that drains your options until only bad options remain. And the next choice will decide whether the ship keeps its eyes or loses them for the rest of the fight. Because the moment the sensors go dark, the ocean becomes a black room, and you are swinging blind. The straight track is the one that scares veterans, because chaos is normal in a swarm. But a clean line can mean a guided weapon with a purpose. On the display, it looks almost polite, a single arrow cutting through a storm of specks, and the system assigns it a higher confidence score, as if the machine itself is whispering, "This one matters." In the headset, someone asks for confirmation from another sensor, and the answer comes back delayed. Not because the crew is slow, but because the network is strained, like a highway at rush hour where every second counts. You can feel the temperature in the room rise from bodies and hardware, the smell of warm plastic, the dryness in your throat, and that tiny physical discomfort becomes another tax on attention. A decision is made: allocate 2 interceptors, because one is a hope and hope is not a plan. The countdown begins in everyone's head, distance closing, time shrinking, and somewhere in the back of the room a quieter fear arrives. What if the clean track is the trap and the messy tracks are the real threat? Because the enemy does not need to win with one punch, they can win by making you block the wrong punch at the wrong time. And if you spend 2 interceptors on a decoy that was designed to look confident, you have just paid the entry fee for the real attack. This is why people who study modern war talk less about weapons and more about effects, because the effect you fear is not a hole in the hull, it is a hole in the picture. A ship can survive damage, but it cannot fight blind, and the fastest way to blindness is sensor disruption at the exact moment your defenses are already saturated. Imagine driving a sports car at night in heavy rain. Now imagine someone smears your windshield with mud, and your dashboard starts giving you wrong directions. You do not crash because the car is weak. You crash because your information is poisoned. On a warship, that poisoning can be noise jamming, deceptive signals, cyber confusion, or simply too many targets forcing the software and the humans into shortcuts. The enemy loves shortcuts, because shortcuts look like efficiency until they become mistakes. A new message flashes, external link degraded, and the words are simple, but the meaning is massive. It means help from other sensors may arrive late, incomplete, or not at all. Now the ship is a boxer, with one eye swollen shut, still dangerous, still swinging, but reading the opponent too slowly. And the opponent is not one fighter, it is a crowd that never gets tired. The first myth to kill is the idea that a modern ship is a single brain. It is many brains, radar teams, EW teams, weapons teams, command teams, and software that tries to glue all those perspectives into one decision fast enough to matter. That glue is called fusion, and fusion is powerful. But it also means a single bad input can spread like a rumor through the whole system. If one sensor is fooled, the ship can correct it. But if multiple sensors are stressed at the same time, the correction arrives late, and late is a different word for useless. In the room, you hear short phrases: track quality, correlation, hostile intent. And each phrase is a doorway to a bigger question nobody has time to discuss fully. A junior operator notices 2 contacts doing something that feels wrong. They are too coordinated, like dancers following a beat the ship cannot hear. That beat is often the unseen controller, a link, a relay, a guiding signal, and if you can find the beat, you can cut it. But finding it takes time. And time is the one thing the ship does not have tonight. So what does the enemy actually want if sinking the ship is not the first step? They want 3 possible wins: drain your magazines, blind your sensors, or force you to reveal your position and your methods. Magazine drain is simple. Make you shoot expensive interceptors at cheap targets until the defensive math flips against you. Sensor blinding is subtler. You do not need to destroy a radar. You can drown it, spoof it, or make the crew distrust it. And forcing you to reveal is the quiet intelligence victory, because when you light up radars, launch certain missiles, switch certain modes, you tell a listening enemy what you can do and how you do it. A ship defending itself is also a ship broadcasting clues like footsteps in snow. That is why an attacker might accept losing 100 drones if it buys them a clean recording of your defensive behavior, because recordings become future weapons. The crew knows this, even if they do not say it out loud, and that knowledge adds another weight to every decision, not just survive, but survive without teaching the enemy too much. At this point, the fight becomes a game of priorities, and priorities are where humans crack. Do you protect the ship's radar at all costs? Or do you accept partial blindness and save weapons for what might be coming next? Do you defend the ship itself, Or do you defend what the ship is guarding? A carrier group, a convoy, a coastline? Because sometimes the mission is bigger than the hull under your feet. A call comes in from elsewhere in the formation. Their picture is different, their contacts are fewer, and that mismatch is terrifying. Because it means the enemy might be shaping the battlefield differently for each node in the network. Divide the defenders, then overwhelm them one by one. That is an old tactic, but now it happens through data instead of smoke. Someone suggests a shift in posture, reduce emissions, lean on passive detection, and suddenly you can feel the whole ship holding its breath. Because going quiet can save you, but it can also make you late. And late is how a single leaker becomes a headline. The sea keeps rolling outside, steady and uncaring, like a metronome mocking the frantic tempo on the bridge. If this Season 1 finale has one lesson, it is that modern defense is not a wall, it is a budget of attention. Your sensors can track only so much with high confidence. Your operators can confirm only so many tracks before fatigue turns speed into sloppiness. And your weapons can engage only so many targets before the magazine becomes a warning. Swarms attack all three budgets at once: attention, confidence, and ammunition. That is why the most important defensive tool might not be a missile. It might be a filter, a way to say, these are decoys, these are harmless, these are the real threats, and I can prove it fast. But proof is hard in the moment. And in war, you often act before proof arrives, which is why the enemy lives in that gap. Another number is spoken: remaining interceptors in a specific cell. And the room reacts the way a body reacts to pain. Not loudly, but with a sudden stillness. Stillness is dangerous, because stillness can become hesitation. And hesitation is the doorway the attackers are waiting to kick open. So how do navies fight back? Not with a miracle shield, but with a new way of thinking. First, they stretch the eyes outward. Drones and helicopters and patrol aircraft pushing the detection line farther so the ship does not have to solve everything at the last second. Second, they diversify sensors, mixing active radar with passive listening, infrared search, and distributed nodes, so one trick cannot poison the whole picture. Third, they build doctrine for saturation, meaning they practice the ugly scenario where the screen is full, the noise is heavy, and the crew must still choose cleanly. Practice matters because panic is not just emotion. It is wasted time, and training turns wasted time into muscle memory. Fourth, they add cheaper layers: guns, jammers, decoys, sometimes directed energy. Because you cannot defend against cheap swarms using only expensive missiles, that is like paying with gold coins to stop kids throwing pebbles. But the most important change is invisible. It is acceptance that the network can fail. And the ship must have a plan for fighting when the team chat goes down. There is a moment in every saturation scenario when the system stops feeling like a machine and starts feeling like a living thing under stress. The computer prioritizes, then reprioritizes. The tracks reorder, the threat rings redraw, and the crew rides that shifting sand while trying to keep one rule true: do not let a single real weapon slip through because you chased too many fakes. This is why decoys are so effective, because they do not need to be perfect. They just need to be convincing for long enough to steal a decision. A decoy that survives 30 seconds has already done its job. It has forced your system to spend processing cycles. It has forced your operators to look at it. It may have forced a launch that cannot be taken back. Out on the water, you might never see the enemy's main platform, a truck on shore, a small boat, an aircraft far beyond the horizon, because the swarm is the interface, like an app on your phone hiding the server behind it. If you cannot touch the server, you have to outplay the app. You have to degrade the swarm's coordination, break its timing, force it to become a pile of independent insects instead of one guided beast. And the easiest way to break coordination is to attack the links, the control signals, the navigation cues, the rhythm behind the dance. That is where electronic warfare becomes more than jamming. It becomes steering. Not just turning the enemy's signal off, but bending it, confusing it, making drones drift, making seekers chase heat that is not real, making guidance believe the horizon is closer than it is. In simple terms, it is like putting a magnet near a compass. The compass still points confidently. It just points confidently in the wrong direction. But EW is not magic. It is physics, and power, and distance. And the enemy can adapt, change frequencies, harden links, switch to autonomy, pre-program routes. And that adaptation is why this is an arms race, not a solved problem. A quiet fear returns to the bridge. What if these drones are not being controlled right now? What if they are already set, like arrows fired earlier, and all the jamming in the world will not call them back? If that is true, your only answer is hard kill, metal on target. And hard kill is exactly what the attacker wanted you to waste earlier. You can feel the trap closing, and the crew can feel it too, because the decisions now have less room for correction, and less room means every mistake gets louder. This is the point in the story where a ship either regains control of the picture or it becomes trapped in reaction mode. Reaction mode feels busy, alarms, launches, tracers, calls, but it is actually defeat wearing the mask of activity, because you are playing the enemy's tempo, not yours. Control mode is quieter, fewer launches, more discrimination, more confidence. And confidence comes from one thing: clarity about what matters most right now. A senior voice cuts through the noise. Prioritize the clean track, verify with passive, hold 2 interceptors in reserve no matter what, and that last instruction lands like a lifeline, because reserves are freedom. Freedom is what swarms try to steal. The freedom to wait, the freedom to choose, the freedom to say no to a decoy. Outside, the wind changes slightly, cooler air slides across the deck, and for a second, the ship feels like it is waking up, not just defending itself, but thinking again. Thinking is survival, because the attackers are betting that you will stop thinking and start flinching. And the next 60 seconds will reveal whether the ship is still the hunter or has become the hunted. The smartest move a defender can make in a swarm is to stop treating every dot like a destiny. So the ship changes its posture, not louder, but sharper. A narrower beam here, a quieter mode there, like someone squinting to separate a real figure from fog. You can hear the difference in the bridge: fewer frantic callouts, more deliberate ones. And that shift is not comfort. It is discipline, the kind you only get when you accept the night is not going to be clean. A passive sensor catches a pattern, a faint signature that repeats, not a sound you would notice in daylight, but in the Black Sea, it stands out like a metronome under a blanket. Repeating patterns mean coordination. Coordination means a controller. And a controller means you can cut the string instead of punching every puppet. But cutting strings takes confidence, and confidence takes time. And time is exactly what the swarm keeps stealing with noise and motion. An operator whispers the most dangerous sentence in any network fight: "I think I see it." Because thinking you see it is one thing, proving it while target's close is another, and the sea does not pause for proof. The captain makes a call. Shift resources to hunt the source of coordination, not just the bodies. And in that moment, you can almost feel the ship trying to become the hunter again. To understand what happens next, imagine you are in a dark hallway and someone keeps flicking the lights on and off. Every time the light flashes, you see shapes, and your brain rushes to label them. Chair, door, threat. And every label feels urgent, even if it is wrong. A swarm weaponizes that instinct. It forces your system to label too fast, then punishes you for labeling wrong. So the ship tries a different tactic. It stops chasing every flash and starts watching for what stays consistent across flashes. Consistency is the signature of intent, because decoys can fake loudness, but they struggle to fake the full logic of a real weapon closing on a real target. One track keeps its energy and its heading, even when noise spikes, even when other tracks split and merge like soap bubbles. That steadiness raises the hair on the back of your neck because it feels like an arrow, not an insect. The ship holds fire for a beat, and that one beat feels longer than a minute because holding fire is a bet, and bets feel heavier than actions. Then another warning comes in. The link quality dips again, and you realize the enemy is trying to isolate the ship right before the arrow reaches the range where it is hardest to stop. This is where the fight becomes brutally simple, Either you regain the picture now, or you spend the rest of the engagement reacting to shadows. A decision is made to deploy decoys, not as a last resort, but as a way to force the enemy to reveal what it is really aiming at. Decoys are like throwing a spare wallet to see if the thief grabs it. The theft tells you where the threat is, even if the wallet was never the real prize. Out on the water, a decoy hits the sea with a slap you can almost feel through the hull, and it begins to broadcast a tempting story. A bigger target, a hotter target, a target that looks easier than a warship that is fighting back. If the incoming track shifts toward the decoy, you learn something. It is seeker-driven. It is hunting what it sees, and that means you can mislead it. If it ignores the decoy, you learn something scarier. It is guided by something else, a controller, a map, a pre-planned route, and that means jamming might not stop it. The bridge goes quiet in the way a room goes quiet when everyone is listening for one sound. Then the track shifts slightly, not fully, just enough to say, "I noticed your bait," and that tiny shift is both relief and warning, because it means the weapon is thinking too. In a perfect world, the defender wants to fight with cheap answers first. Jamming is cheaper than interceptors, decoys are cheaper than jamming, guns are cheaper than missiles, and the cheapest of all is correct identification, because it prevents waste. But the ocean is never a perfect world. The air is wet and noisy. The horizon is cluttered, and a sea-skimming weapon can hide inside the background, like a shark under dark water. The ship tries to jam, pushing energy into the air like a bright flashlight aimed at the enemy's eyes. The problem with flashlights is that they also reveal you, and somewhere out there, a listening enemy smiles when your emissions spike, because emissions are fingerprints. A report comes in. Some of the smaller contacts wobble, their paths less coordinated now, as if the swarm has lost its rhythm. That is a win, but it is a partial win, because the clean track is still clean, still closing, still refusing to panic. The captain hears another number. The reserve is intact, but only barely, and suddenly the reserve feels like the last matches in a cold cabin. You can use them, but then what? And right as the crew begins to focus on that one arrow, the swarm does what swarms do best. It distracts. It creates a second crisis to steal your gaze. A new cluster appears on the edge of the screen, not dozens, but enough to force a decision. And that is how the enemy splits your brain. It is the oldest trick in any fight. Make the defender choose between two dangers, then punish the choice. The air in the bridge feels stale now, recycled and warm, and you can taste metal in your mouth, not from blood, but from stress, a weird detail people remember after the adrenaline fades. The captain asks the question that decides outcomes. Which threat kills us first? One team argues the cluster could be leakers, low and fast, the kind that slip through if you ignore them. Another team argues the arrow is the real knife, because it behaves like something built to hit hard, not just to distract. So the ship makes the only move that keeps both possibilities alive. It assigns the cheapest layer to the cluster, guns and close defense, while holding the precious interceptors for the arrow. That choice feels smart, until you realize cheap layers have their own limits, arcs, rates of fire, cooling cycles, and those limits become painful when you face more targets than the designers imagined. The first bursts begin, the ship barking into the night, and you hear the rhythm change again, faster now, like the metronome has jumped to a new tempo. Close defense is a knife fight, and knife fights are about angles. The guns can cover only certain sectors cleanly, and the enemy knows that because geometry is public information, and training teaches attackers where your blind spots might live. A drone dives low, using the sea's surface like camouflage, and another climbs, forcing the system to switch attention up and down like a cameraman trying to film two stories at once. You smell cordite and hot oil as the machinery works, and that smell is strangely grounding because it is real, unlike the invisible war in the radio spectrum. The cluster begins to thin, several contacts disappear, and for a moment it feels like the ship is winning. Then a new warning, incoming object speed increasing, and it does not match a small drone profile anymore. That is the moment your stomach drops, because the swarm was not the punch, it was the hands covering the punch. The arrow was the knife. But now, there might be a hammer behind it. And if a hammer arrives while your attention is pinned to the knife fight, the outcome can flip in one heartbeat. The captain's voice stays steady. Allocate, intercept, 2 shots, do not miss. And everyone in the room feels the weight of that sentence, because you cannot afford a lesson right now, only a result. Intercept decisions sound simple, but they are actually a chain of micro-decisions. When to fire, which seeker mode, which fuse setting, which target track, which confirmation level. Each micro-decision is a tiny doorway where the enemy can push confusion through. The ship fires, and somewhere out beyond the horizon a missile streaks through cold air, a bright, violent line in a world that was black a second ago. On the bridge, nobody cheers, because you do not celebrate a punch while the fight is still moving. The system updates, intercept predicted, then the prediction wobbles. Then the wobbles become uncertainty, and uncertainty is the enemy's favorite color. A second shot is authorized faster than the first, because when doubt appears, human instinct is to spend more to buy certainty back. That instinct saves lives sometimes, and empties magazines other times, and the enemy designs scenarios to make you follow it automatically. The second interceptor goes, and now the reserve is thinner, and the captain knows it, and you can hear the tension in the silence, not panic, but the awareness that the next wave might arrive when you have fewer answers left. Then the track breaks apart, but it breaks in a way that feels wrong, too clean, too convenient, like a magician's misdirection. Because a broken track can mean a kill, or it can mean the weapon went quiet, and quiet weapons are the ones that hurt you. For a few seconds, the bridge becomes a place of listening again. Not listening for sound, but listening for meaning, waiting to see if the screen stays empty, or if the emptiness is a lie. A passive sensor whispers a new hint, a faint return that does not behave like debris. It behaves like something still moving with intent. The crew realizes the enemy may have done something clever. Reduce emissions, lower signature, slip into the seam between what your radar sees and what your passive sensors can confirm quickly. In other words, the fight has moved into the cracks, and cracks are where the best attackers live. The captain makes a decision that feels counterintuitive. Do not fire immediately. Force the track to show itself. Force it to commit to a path before you spend your last clean shots. This is the chess part of the night, where patience can win and impatience can lose everything. But patience also has a cost, because the closer the object gets, the fewer seconds you have for a second attempt if the first attempt fails. The air outside is colder now, the wind has teeth, and the sea is still dark, and you realize how small a warship is compared to the ocean. A single moving dot in a huge, indifferent world. Then the track reappears, closer than it should be, and the room reacts as one body, because the enemy just stole distance, and distance is life. The ship goes all in, not emotionally, but procedurally. Last best shot, last clean geometry, last chance to stop the hammer before it becomes a physical impact you cannot argue with. Another interceptor launches, and the sound is distant through steel, like thunder heard from inside a cave. The system shows closing, 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 and now every person on the bridge is counting in their head, not seconds, but probabilities. If it hits, we lose more than metal. We lose sensors. We lose the network. We lose the ability to protect what we were sent to protect. The intercept happens, or at least it seems to, a bloom on the display, a sudden drop in speed, a change in trajectory, and the crew feels the first real breath of relief. Then a second object appears behind it, smaller, faster, riding the confusion like a surfer riding the wake of a larger wave. That is the nightmare scenario. Layered attacks, a big obvious threat to pull defenses, then a smaller one to slip through the gap created by your response. It is not genius, it is just timing, and timing is what swarms and modern coordination make cheap. Now the ship has fewer interceptors, and the last layer is staring at something that might be seconds away. The guns begin again, louder, angrier, and you can feel the vibration in your teeth. This is the climax of the season. Not because it is the loudest moment, but because it reveals the true shape of the war. The true war is not missile versus ship. It is decision versus deception, and the enemy just forced the ship to make 3 high-stakes decisions in rapid sequence. First, spend interceptors to stop the arrow. Second, spend more to stop the hammer. Third, confront the leaker that arrives in the wake when your resources are thinner and your confidence is already bruised. The leaker is close enough now that the defensive system treats it differently. Less prediction, more reflex, because at short range, the future collapses into the present. A decoy is launched again, a last-second lie thrown into the air, and the leaker hesitates for a fraction of a moment, which is all the ship needs. The close defense locks. The roar becomes a continuous tearing sound, and the night flashes with brief sparks far from the ship, like someone striking matches in a storm. The contact disappears, and this time it disappears with the right kind of mess, scattered returns, chaotic fragments, the signature of something actually breaking apart. No one celebrates. Not yet. Because the enemy's last gift is doubt. What if that was not the last one? What if the swarm still has another wave in the dark? But the screen begins to clear, not instantly, but gradually, like fog lifting, and the bridge finally hears a sound it has not heard all night. Quiet. In the quiet, you notice details you ignored before. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the faint creak of the ship's frame, the salty dampness on the back of your neck. You also notice what you spent: interceptors, decoys, gun rounds, operator focus, and something harder to measure, trust in the picture. Because even when you win the engagement, the enemy can still win a lesson. They can learn how you react, what you prioritize, how fast you confirm, where you hesitate, which emissions spike, which layers you burn first. That is why the kill chain war never ends with one exchange. It continues as a cycle of adaptation. Record, analyze, upgrade, repeat. The captain asks for damage assessment, not just physical, but informational. Which sensors degraded? Which links dropped? Where did the picture fail? And why? Those questions are the real after-action report, because the next swarm will be designed around the cracks you just exposed. This is also where human fatigue hits, like a wave after the storm. Your hands shake slightly, your jaw feels tight, and you realize you were holding your breath for minutes at a time. The crew did not just fight drones. They fought the pressure of having to be perfect, while the enemy only had to be annoying long enough. And that asymmetry is the modern battlefield in one sentence. Defense must be accurate. Offense can be clever and cheap. So what did we actually learn from this night? The kind of lesson you can carry forward, not as hype, but as strategy. Lesson 1. Magazines are time, and time is life. So any enemy that can drain your magazines is buying the right to dictate the ending. Lesson 2. Sensor fusion is powerful but fragile under stress, because a fused picture can spread a single bad assumption everywhere. Lesson 3. The network is both your superpower and your weakness, because when it is clean, you are fast, and when it is degraded, you are lonely. Lesson 4. Cheap layers are not optional. They are survival. You cannot answer a swarm with only gold-plated solutions. You need bulk answers that keep your premium shots for premium threats. Lesson 5. The enemy does not always want to sink you. Sometimes they want to blind you. Sometimes they want to teach themselves about you. And sometimes they want to force you into reaction mode until you make a mistake that does the sinking for them. And here is the uncomfortable one. Lesson 6. Autonomy is coming for both sides. When the swarm stops needing constant control, and when defenses start delegating micro-decisions to machines, the speed of war accelerates beyond human comfort. That means the next battles will be won by preparation, doctrine, and architectures that fail gracefully, not by the fantasy of a perfect shield. If you want to see the future, do not look only at new missiles. Look at the plumbing of war, the links, the power, the processing, the training, the rules, the ability to keep fighting when the perfect picture collapses. Navies are already shifting toward distributed sensing, more unmanned scouts, more passive detection, more layered decoys, and in some cases, new defensive tools meant to lower the cost per shot. But every defensive improvement creates a new offensive angle. Different frequencies, different routes, different deception. And that means the arms race is not about one invention. It is about who can iterate fastest. That is why the kill chain itself becomes the target, not just the weapons at the end of it. Break the chain at sensing, and the defender is blind. Break it at processing, and the defender is confused. Break it at decision, and the defender hesitates. Break it at action, and the defender wastes shots. And if you can break it at updating, if you can prevent the defender from learning mid-fight, then you can keep them trapped in yesterday's assumptions while you operate in tomorrow's tempo. That is the quiet horror of modern conflict. It is not just violent, it is fast. And speed punishes anyone who cannot adapt in minutes, not months. Season 1 has been building to this. Not a single platform, not a single nation, not a single heroic gadget, but a single truth. The battlefield is the system. A $2 billion warship is not just steel and missiles. It is a moving network of sensors, links, people, procedures, and trust. Attack the steel, and you might or might not succeed. But attack the trust, and you can make a powerful ship behave like a scared animal, flinching at shadows, burning resources, revealing itself, shrinking its options. Defend the system, and you can survive, even when the screen is ugly, because you have rehearsed ugliness, you have built cheap layers, you have planned for isolation, you have accepted that certainty is rare and discipline is everything. The crew on that bridge does not remember the night as a set of technical terms. They remember the sound of alarms stacking, the smell of hot electronics, the vibration of guns through the deck, the dry mouth when the reserve count dropped, the moment a track reappeared, closer than it should have been. And they remember the final lesson. You do not win by having more firepower. You win by protecting the chain that turns information into action, and by breaking the enemy's chain first. So here's the takeaway you can hold on to as the season closes. In the old stories, war was about strength. In the new stories, war is about tempo, perception, and the ability to keep choosing well when the picture lies. If you can make the enemy waste attention, waste missiles, waste confidence, you can win without ever landing the first hit, because you are shaping the decisions that lead to the hit. And if you are the defender, the goal is not to be invincible. The goal is to be unplayable. To deny the enemy the clean openings they want, to keep reserves, to keep clarity, to keep a plan for when the network goes quiet. This was the kill chain war. Not a single weapon, but a contest over who gets to define reality for long enough to act on it. The ocean is still out there, dark and cold, and the next swarm is already being designed in someone's lab. Cheaper, smarter, more patient. But the defenders are adapting too, spreading sensors, building cheap layers, drilling for saturation, learning how to fight with imperfect information without collapsing into panic. And that is where Season 2 begins, not with a bigger explosion, but with a sharper question. When machines can see, decide, and strike faster than humans can breathe, who controls the chain, and what happens when nobody can fully trust what they see?